Now, you guys know how I feel about debt. I have talked extensively about debt. I made a whole episode about COVID-19 and debt in yesterday's episode. But um, let's just talk in general why it is good to be out of debt. Well, because when you're out of debt, you have money, right? And when I'm talking about debt, I'm talking about credit cards, student loans, medical bills, payday loans. I'm talking about your car loans. I'm talking about anything that you are paying on month by month that is not your primary residence, is not your home. That would be considered consumer debt in this particular step. And we want all of that consumer debt paid off. And when we have that consumer debt paid off, and then what we have is options, right? This is one of the biggest steps of having financial freedom. It's one of the biggest issues in the lives of many Americans today is that we are so deeply indebted to car companies and so deeply indebted to credit card companies and to these student loan lenders. We are so heavily indebted. And in being so, we don't have cash to do things like spend money on things that we want to spend without going into debt to do so. We don't have the ability to save money, to have any type of rainy day fund. We don't have the ability to invest at a high level in order to grow our money forward for the future and have money to retire on. And we can't give money and be extremely generous because we don't have any margin to do so. That is what debt is taking away from you. It's taking away the options that you have with your money to do things that you want to do with it, whether it be giving, saving, or spending in any of our three uses of money in any proportions that you want to do so. Whether it is any of those three that you want to do with your money, you are being kept from doing that by having debt. And so we don't want to have debt in our lives. We don't want to have that consumer debt pulling us down. And when you're out of consumer debt, think about how quickly you can build wealth. Think about how quickly you can save money. Think about how quickly you can just decide to give money to someone in need. It's a much easier decision. It's a much less constrained decision. You will have less stress. You will have less anxiety. You will have less worry about your finances when you don't owe money to anyone. And so that is why, in general, being out of debt is so huge. But when we're talking in light of the pandemic, in light of COVID-19, why was being out of debt so important? Because if you lose your job, right? If the economy shuts down and you lose your job, and I talked about this yesterday, if you lose your job, you immediately are in a place where you need to keep as much money in your house as possible. You need to keep as much income as maybe your spouse is making or as you can go out and make, or you need to keep as much of your savings set aside as you can. And it's hard to do that when you have debt payments to make. I know that they have put pauses on student loans for now, but car companies are still charging you. Most mortgage companies are still wanting their money on time, even though some have given some concessions, but those concessions aren't necessarily good for the borrowers. The credit card companies are still wanting their money. And amid all of this, you are in a place where you don't have a job. Well, if you don't have a job and you're owing money in all these places, it's going to get real stressful real quick. But if you are out of consumer debt, you have no consumer debt, and you can push forward and you can allow yourself to have some freedom in your financial life. You can have some options as to what to do because you don't have all of this debt that you have to service, then you're in a much better place and you can move forward. So that particular step is huge in pushing towards financial freedom. And it is huge that when a crisis comes, being in debt is always a dangerous place to be. Now, apart from that fourth part, the fifth part is the second biggest part of the financial action plan, especially amid a pandemic. And that is to save 4 to 6 months of household expenses into an emergency fund. And the reason that we want to do this is so when we do lose a job, or when we're out of work for 3, 4, 5 months, or when our spouse loses a job, or when somebody in the family gets COVID and we have these medical bills that we have to put up with, or anything that may have occurred along those lines, you have money to pay with it. You don't have to worry about, how am I going to pay for this? I have to swipe my credit card. I have to use, a payday loan, or I have to go about, finding some way to borrow this money. You don't have to borrow the money. You can just reach over. I know it's painful to make big payments, and it's painful to use that emergency fund, but that is what it is there for. It is there for things that are, they are urgent, they are necessary, and they were not expected. They were unexpected. And in being all of those three things, then we would use that money on whatever it may be. But it puts an even bigger cushion. We put that 1 month of expenses aside, and that puts a cushion between you and life. But this puts an even bigger cushion to where if something occurs, right? If one of these, really tough situations comes up, especially amid the pandemic, then you can be in a place where you can just simply pay for it in cash. It puts you in a place of financial strength. And there's no better place to be in a pandemic, in a crisis, in any type of situation where the economy is not doing well, than with a lot of cash in your bank account, a lot of liquid ability to make decisions that have to be made, because emergencies can come. And like I said, many emergencies have come this year. And so being able to deal with those in cash up front is so huge. And again, having this money laying around is going to allow us, if we were to lose a job, to have less stress and less anxiety surrounding that job loss, and less tension between spouses, or whatever may occur that is negative because of a job loss. You will be able to continue in your household in a relatively normal manner until you get back to full-time work, and hopefully that is within a 4 to 6 month time period.